Good morning, everyone. Today is Monday, and I'm going to finish reading from the Bedtime Bible Stories book of the Crucifixion and Resurrection of Jesus. Peter's denial. While Jesus was being questioned, Peter stood in the courtyard of the high priest. It was a cold evening. There was a fire in the middle of the courtyard. Peter stood by the fire seeking warmth. A servant girl of the high priest came by. She stopped when she saw Peter. She looked at him closely. "Weren't you with that Jesus of Nazareth?" But he denied it. "I don't know what you're talking about." He walked quickly to the entryway. There, another girl looked at him and told the crowd of people, "This fellow is one of them. He was with that Jesus." Again, Peter denied it. After a little while, others standing close by said, "You must be one of the followers, for you are a Galilean." Peter yelled at the crowd, "I don't know the man you are talking about." Immediately, Peter heard a rooster crow. Sadly, he remembered the words Jesus spoke to him. "Before the rooster crows, you will deny me 3 times." He went outside and cried. The death of Judas. Judas, the man who betrayed Jesus, thought Jesus would not die. Perhaps he thought a man who performed miracles on others would save himself. But the men who were guarding Jesus had beat him and mocked him. Judas saw that Jesus was bound and beaten. He heard the rulers discussing putting Jesus to death. He returned the 30 pieces of silver to the chief priests and elders. "I have betrayed an innocent man." They replied, "Why do we care? That is your responsibility." Judas threw the money in the temple and left. He went away and hanged himself. The chief priests could not put blood money in the treasury. They decided to use the money to buy a potter's field, a burial place for foreigners and poor people. It is called the Field of Blood. Jesus appears before Pilate and Herod. Jesus was led before the council of the elders at daybreak. "If you are the Christ, tell us," they said. Jesus answered, "You will not believe me, but from now on, the Son of Man will be seated at the right hand of God." The whole council rose and led him to Pilate. "This man is an evildoer." Pilate listened to the council. "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "It is as you say." Then Pilate announced to the chief priest, "I see no reason to charge this man with a crime." But they cried out, "He agitates people from here to Galilee." Pilate said, "If this man is from Galilee, he needs to go before the ruler Herod." Herod was pleased to have a chance to see Jesus. He had heard so much about him. Perhaps he would perform a miracle for Herod's court. He asked many questions, but Jesus gave no answers. Everyone in the room, including the priests and lawyers, were making fun of him. Herod also mocked him. He let his soldiers dress him in an elegant robe. He then sent him back to Pilate. Pilate called those concerned and told them that neither he nor Herod could find charges against Jesus. "I will punish him and then release him. You know it is the custom to set a prisoner free during Passover." At that time there was a prisoner named Barabbas, who was a robber and a murderer. The rulers talked to the crowd. They told the crowd to ask for Barabbas. Pilate said, "Who shall it be? Do you want Jesus, King of the Jews, or do you want Barabbas?" The crowd yelled, "Give us Barabbas." Pilate asked them again. They shouted, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" Finally, Pilate granted their demand. He released Barabbas. He knew Jesus was a good and fair man, but he sent him to the cross. On the cross. Jesus was too weak to carry his own cross. As they were leaving the city, they met a man named Simon of Cyrene. He was forced to carry the cross. They stopped at a place called Golgotha in Hebrew, the Jewish language, or Calvary in Latin. Both mean the place of the skull. They offered Jesus a drink, which would dull his senses and make the pain easier, but he wanted to have a clear mind. He knew he would suffer. They laid the cross on the ground. Jesus was stretched across it. They drove nails in his hands and feet to fasten him to the cross. Then they stood the cross upright and stuck it in the ground. While they were doing this, Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they are doing." While watching over him, the soldiers cast lots for his clothes. Pilate had a sign placed above his head, which read, "This is Jesus, King of the Jews." It was written in 3 languages, Hebrew, Latin, and Greek. There were 2 robbers who were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Most who walked by yelled insults at him. "If you are Son of the God, come down from the cross." He saved others, but he can't save himself. The death of Jesus. By the cross of Jesus stood his mother, filled with sadness for her son. With her was John, the disciple Jesus loved best. Others present were Mary, wife of Cleopas, his mother's sister, and a woman named Mary Magdalene. It was now about the 6th hour. The whole world was dark because the sun was not shining. Jesus was in great pain. He cried out, "My God, why have you forsaken me?" Later he said, "I thirst." Someone dipped a sponge in vinegar, put it on a reed, and gave it to him to drink. Then Jesus spoke his last word. He called out in a loud voice, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." After saying this, he died. At that moment, the curtain in the temple split in 2. The centurion walked up to the cross and praised God. Truly, he is the Son of God. At the tomb. After Jesus died, one of the soldiers ran a spear into his side to make certain he was truly dead. Water and blood ran out of the wound. It was Joseph of Arimathea who asked Pilate of the body of Jesus. He was a follower and a good man, but he had told few because of his fears of the Jewish leaders. Joseph took Jesus' body off the cross. Nicodemus, the man who had come to Jesus in the night, was also present. He brought myrrh and aloes. The 2 covered the body with spices and wrapped it in linen, then placed it in a tomb that Joseph had cut out of the rock. He rolled a big stone in front of the tomb and left the garden. Mary Magdalene and Mary sat in the garden by the tomb. The next day, some of the rulers went to Pilate to remind him that Jesus had said he would rise again in 3 days. Pilate put a guard on the tomb so the disciples could not enter. The resurrection. The sun was shining. It was Sunday morning, 3 days since Jesus had died. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went back to look at the tomb. Just then, there was a powerful earthquake. An angel came down from heaven, rolled back the stone, and sat on it. Jesus stepped out in clothes as white as snow. The guards shook with fear. The angel spoke to the woman, "Do not be afraid. Jesus is not here. He has risen, just as he said he would. Come here and see where he was. Then go tell the disciples. He is on his way to Galilee. Go there to see him." The women ran quickly from the tomb, afraid yet happy. Suddenly, Jesus met them. "Hello," he said. They fell at his feet and worshipped him. "Don't be afraid. Go tell everyone to come to Galilee." Happy Easter!